Alors, Peter, bienvenue à Montréal. Merci d'être là aujourd'hui. First thing I'd like to say, Peter, is how honored I am to have this conversation with you today. Your whole career exemplifies creativity and integrity. And today you are one of the most influential and most distinguished industry leaders in the industry of strategic consulting and strategic marketing. And yet, Peter, when you told your parents that you had selected to become a communications professional, your father was not very happy with you. With your credentials, you could have embraced any other profession, yet you chose this one. Why? Why do you think that communications is so important?
Why communications? Well, first I do want to say thank you to Jordan, thank you to the center, thank you to the school, and to this rather special university that exists and thrives in the city of Montreal. And thank you to my old friends, particularly Madeleine Stenjacques, with whom I worked for years. And by the way, Dominique, I thought that I was not asked here because of all those wonderful things you said about me, but because I went to Exeter and Princeton like Andrew Molson. So I thought that's why I was here. Yes, my father, though, to get back to your question, my father was very displeased because in his impression, he was a petroleum engineer and he was in the oil business and he was dealing with issues of the Middle East at the time. And he thought, he had the same vision or prevision of what advertising marketing would be like as Mad Men, the show, which I did see for 20 minutes one day. My wife also was in the advertising business. As a matter of fact, I married the boss. At the time, I was a trainee, and I married the boss, and I thought that's the way to get ahead. But honestly, I stopped watching it because if it was about an architectural firm, I would have found it very interesting. But when I kept hearing about names that I remembered, companies and so forth, I disconnected. I'm not suggesting that that world didn't happen or there wasn't some of that in the business in those days, but it never happened to me. I never managed to drink at lunch. To my knowledge, no woman ever hit on me, so I couldn't quite relate to that world. I just worked very hard. So my father had that kind of a vision. He said, "You don't drink, Peter, so what are you going to do in the advertising business?" Well, I ended up in the advertising business by total, like so many things in life, you know, you plan for this and you plan for that, and then a window or a door opens and you're somewhere else, if you're ready for it. I had a job. The placement director was my friend, and one day he said to me, "Peter, you have to go interview somebody." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because only one person signed up to see him, and we want him to come back to Stanford Business School, that was. We wanted to come back here, so we got to show some interest. So you go interview him." So I walked out of his office. "By the way, what business is he in?" "Advertising." I said, "Perfect. I know nothing about it." So then I went to see this wonderful gentleman. He told me about the fact what they were doing. They do this research, and then he said, "You have a choice. You can become an account manager and manage people and things, coordinate, or you can become a research professional. So which would you rather be?" I said, "That research training sounds interesting, but I want to be in, because I like people, I want to be with people." That's all I knew how to say about advertising. I like people. So he says, "Oh, that's a good idea." So he whips in his pocket and gives me a ticket. And I went to New York, and I fell in love with it because they were serious about this. They really were committed to understand people. They had extraordinary models. In fact, both theoretical models that they had at that time and the care with which they were looking at the customer was amazing. And that's the world I like. That's how my brain is wired. And yeah, that's how I went in the advertising business.
That's a nice story. You love people. There's something else that you love very much reading your books. You love brand.
Yes.
And you speak about the idea of brand in every single one of your books and almost every chapter. Brand is implicit in everything. Why is brand so important, and what makes a brand strong?
Right. Well, brand is very important in today's world. We live in a world of what I call excess supply. And what I mean by this, it's a world in where every resource has become abundant. There are hardly any scarcity. Way back when, the reason we call free market capitalism is because capital was the differentiator. If you had money, you could build factories, you could build distribution systems. Now it's something else. It's not necessarily money, and all other resources, you can think of it with very few exceptions. Probably fresh water is the only exception I can think of. You may think of others. Oil, for example, if you have the will, we can be off fossil fuel and on to the next, whatever it is. But that's our choice. The reason that what excess supply does is forces products and service towards commodityness. There's an inexorable pressure for products' sameness. Products look the same, they appear the same, the consumers can hardly tell the difference, usually except for price. So the only inexorable solution to this commodityness is differentiation that comes from innovation and creativity. So differentiation, relevance, and quality. Differentiation is the key. If you're not different, nobody pays any attention to you. But you can't be crazy different, you have to be relevant. And then you have to have this quality bit, which is a combination of not only product quality, which is increasingly assumed, but trust, a very important factor in the business world of tomorrow. So brands become important in this world of commodityness, because otherwise you're going to get shopped on price. And so the brand is a contract, really, between the product and service and the consumer. The brand promises something special, something superior as an offering to the consumer, and in return the consumer gives you some non-monogamistic loyalty and a willingness to pay a slightly higher price. That's the contract. That's what a brand is. And the job of everybody in the company is to keep this contract alive at all times. And it's hard work. And by the way, that superior benefit that the consumer feels can be functional, it could be psychological, but it has to be real. And almost always it should come, in my opinion, from the soul of the product itself. Worry about the product. Not just marketing, not just spin. Start with a product, have a great product, and then find a way to communicate the differences and the relevance and the trust that you establish with the consumer. It takes a long time to build the brand strength, and it's very easy to destroy it.
Many of us here work for corporations where we don't feel we actually have a product. But you told me last week everybody has a product. But what's the difference between product brand and corporate brand?
Well, there is a difference. A corporation sometimes needs to be, sometimes the corporation and the brand are the same. In other cases, they are the source of the production of the corporation. People know Procter & Gamble, for example, makes all kinds of different products and stuff. But Procter & Gamble is a highly respected corporation and is the source of many of their products. The consumer is now very sophisticated. They know. We live in a digital world. And the digital world is infinite in the amount of information that sort of bombards the consumer. And so I think increasingly in today's world, the brand, there are several brands. There's the product brand, service brand, and there's the corporate brand. Both are terribly important. And in the case of other corporations, you know, the corporate brand is the product brand, like Molson's, for example. And both of them have got to be preserved, maintained at this level of, with the integrity and differentiation and relevance to the consumer.
You talked a little bit about trust. I think it would be interesting to talk about values in general. This year, the World Economic Summit at Davos identified a global crisis of trust as a key issue. The public generally evaluates businesses based on their values and their behaviors, and yet business leaders look at transactional factors such as customer service and products. In your book, The Constant Choice, you state that evil is alive virtually everywhere, including in the business world. What's your definition of evil, and how do values fit in?
I thought this was a business seminar, not a philosophical. But you're right. You know, the reason evil is everywhere is because evil can hide in all of us. I happen to believe you can believe in a religious evil, you can believe in whatnot. I also believe in an evolutionary evil. We were resting in the African plains for 7 million years. There we had to face the predators, or our ancestors did. And they had to be like them, vicious and aggressive and deceitful, and that's what it took to fight and survive. And they had to face famines, and greed became critical, and entitlement, and me first, and hoarding. And all those instincts are still part of our DNA because it took a long time to build our DNA that way. And this is not to depress us, this beautiful, sunny, wonderful morning in Montreal, but to really give us the insight that these instincts, the instincts, by the way, don't control us. We get to choose. And the one thing I learned in my life is the kindness of so many people, the goodness, the compassion, the loving acts that have been bestowed upon me throughout my life. I've experienced both sides, of course, as Andrew mentioned, but there's also a lot of goodness in this world, and we all have that too. And so that's what the book's title was, The Constant Choice, because every day we have a decision to make. How are we going to behave? And one of the critical thing in the world is, if you're in the business world, your most important constituency, stakeholder, is the customer. We can never forget that. We work for them. We may think we have transactions and work for money or this or that. No, I remember a story. I was fortunate to know Peter Drucker. Some of you may know who he is. A giant in the business world. And this businessman sent him a whole bunch of P&Ls and balance sheet data and sales information, etc. And a month later, he went to see the great man, and he said, "Sir, how can I make more money?" And he said, "You should make better shoes." So, you know, at the end of the day, it's respecting your customer. That's how you make money. That's how you bring success. So values matters. Integrity matters. You have to like your customers. I'm sorry. Maybe even love them so that you can be in your shoes. You got to walk in their shoes. You got to feel their pain. You got to feel what their needs are and really commit yourself. That's the beginning, I think, of good business. And that's where values must come into play. And choosing to be greedy, choosing all the instinctive things that we can be, particularly when we press into the corner and the shareholders scream at you and the boss screams at you, that's when you're tested. And if you really want to be successful and win, you got to put and trust your values. And if you trust your values, I think values is one of the two most important differentiators. All of you wonderful folks who are learning the competencies of today's complex world, which you have to do. But that's the entry ticket into the game, isn't it? And then what are the differentiators? The hard things to do is to be innovative and creative, because that's the only way you win in this commodity game, is to be different all the time. So sustained creativity and innovation is the answer, along with values. That's what's going to make the difference. I don't care what your business is. The winners will do those two things.
Talking about trust, recently the world became aware of a terrible cover-up in the automotive industry with the dirty secrets of Volkswagen, who was falsifying pollution information. Yet that company, Peter, had already overtaken Toyota as the largest car maker. So they had made it, they had succeeded. What's your take on it? Why did they do that?
What did I say? Was greed one of the things? Yeah, you see, and it's very hard and it's difficult. I had the privilege of working with so many leaders of wonderful, great companies, and you see the importance that the leader has on their corporations, and how things really permeate from the top. And you know, these people wanted at all costs to win at all costs, be bigger. Let's get just a little bit further, ahead of Toyota or God knows what. And it's an understandable thing in business or in sports or anything like that. And back to values. Let's win the right way. If you win the right way, you can stay there forever, because it will guide you through the temptations and all the difficult things that we all encounter. Nothing goes in a straight line up. There are bumps all along the way. So you have to be able to deal with crises, with impediments of your own creation or outside unforeseen circumstances. But you can always win if you do it the right way. Now, this is a extraordinary case in point. If the CEO was involved in this, I hope he goes to jail, because I think it's important for the business world to understand that these are just not acceptable things. And if he didn't know, then he failed at another way. He didn't have the right culture. And let's talk a little bit about culture. Because you cannot manage a company through rules and regs. That just doesn't work. You have to have them. But acceptable behavior is something that is ingrained in a culture where the people in the organization, like this university, you have 45,000 students in this larger university here. But you're going to have to create a culture of what this university is about. And from the president I heard, we're scrappy, we are gritty, we work hard, we're involved in the community, we see the pulse of the people in the business. That's great. That's a culture. And that's what hurt Volkswagen. They clearly did not have a culture where so many people had to have been involved in this thing and think it was acceptable in the sense of saying we're going to stay number one at all costs. That the culture failed. And if you're a leader of a small group or a large group, doesn't matter, you have to create a culture which says this is what we do in our organization. And you have to start from there. That's basic. So that's number one. That's where they failed. The second thing, let's talk about public relations now. I mean, there's some basics. And I've learned public relations from the gentleman, Harold Burson, or Burson Marsteller, that Andrew mentioned, that was part of young Rubicam. And 101, PR 101, when something goes wrong, you can't possibly try to hide it. Go up there. You say, look, this is what happened. I'm sorry. And the other rule on PR, for my money, is you either manage your own perception or you leave it to somebody else to manage your perception. And you're not going to like it. Trust me. Nobody's going to come to your rescue up there in the marketplace, right? You're going to paint you with their brush the way they want to paint you and give it to media. They're very good at that. So the second thing that they made a mistake on is not to go right up front, for the CEO to go right up front. He got bad advice. Whomever his PR people were terrible, to say, boy, right up front, unacceptable, I'm sorry, we'll make it up, etc. No, slowly start to dribble out piece by piece, and oh my God, it was a nightmare. Everything, you couldn't design a case to do it worse than Volkswagen did. And this is really going to hurt Volkswagen. There are many brands around, and I'm not predicting anything because much will depend on what will ensue and how they play in the future. But they did everything wrong, and they're going to pay for it big time. The consumer is very unforgiving, let me tell you, very unforgiving.
It will be interesting to see if that brand ever recovers. In 1982, you were working very closely with the CEO of Johnson & Johnson when they had the Tylenol recall. And you also mentioned in your book the story of Firestone tires. So these are two different stories, two examples, one that did things right and one company that did not do things right. So obviously, it's going to be very tricky for Volkswagen because they have really started on the wrong foot on this one.
Firestone, other than the library that we know very well at Princeton, hardly exists anymore. And they did everything that Volkswagen did. So I won't go through the case, but that's what they did. And you know, Jim Burke, CEO of Johnson & Johnson at the time. And this was early on. There were no examples of this. There were two people, as you recall, two people died because somebody put some poison pills in a Tylenol bottle and they died in Chicago. And he made a decision to take every single bottle of Tylenol off the market. His net worth went down 40%. The net worth of Johnson & Johnson went down 40% on that decision. And that's when he came out with the safety cap that you couldn't break. And within months, Johnson & Johnson had 20% higher net worth than they did before the crisis. Now that's the powerful, powerful example of values and how you play by values and win with values. Because long term, in 99% of the time, you're going to win with values. You're going to win. And almost always, sooner or later, you know, there's so many people who think they're the smartest light bulb in the room. And they can do anything. They're so much smarter than everybody else. And they can pull it off. And I have yet to meet the person who's smarter than everybody else. We're all plenty smart people. And the way you win is not by trying to outwit somebody else through doing the wrong things. You can never do it. And this is the examples. And it works.
So that's the importance of values. You also talk about 5 principles in your book. But you also talk a lot about leadership. I think you just gave a great example of leadership with the Johnson & Johnson. So what about leadership? What does a leader do to create, to instill the corporate culture in the organization?
Oh, that's easy. Actually, it is easy. You walk the talk. Look, I look around the faces. Many of you are parents. If not, you understand because of your own experience. You pay no attention or very little attention to what people say, generally speaking. Yeah, sure. You pay attention to what people do. So when the leader really lives by example, you're really in the right spot because the organization knows what you spend your time doing. I care very much about clients, as I heard you heard me say. And even as a CEO, I spend more than 50% of my time being with clients. Not being an administrative CEO, but also worrying about my clients' businesses. And everybody in the organization knew that that was what mattered. You know, we had 350 offices around the world in 90 countries. And even at the end of the day, I did not go to maybe 35, 40% of the offices in the world. Never got there. because I had to go to see the clients, wherever clients were. I did come to Montreal, though. I knew the places to go. But you have to be, if you're in the service business, it's about clients. And this is what we said earlier. What we have lost right now is respect for our customers. The customers could be a business customer or could be somewhere in the streets out there. And you have to understand the customers, and you have to walk the walk, and instill leadership is to spend the time on the values that you really care instilling in the culture. And then your colleagues are going to follow suit and so forth. It cascades down to the organizations, and that's how you build the culture.
Let's talk about the future a little bit. When I read your book, The Source of Success, and I realized you had written that book in 2004, or it was published in 2004. So that was 11 years ago. And yet in that book, you quite accurately predicted the impact of the internet and social media. You didn't call it social media, you called it interactivity. But that's what we're going through today. And you argued at the time that as everything was becoming commoditized, the most important assets are employees and clients. Can you please elaborate a bit more on that? And is that still true today? Do you still feel exactly the same way that you felt in 2004 when you wrote that?
Very much so. I think, in fact, back to the notion of branding. In the digital world, brands become ever more important than they were before. And the ability to keep the brand relevant, differentiated, and trusted is getting more difficult. It's getting more difficult because the internet is an open megaphone for anybody to scream as loud as they can. And unlike the usual arguments that you have in a one-to-one or in a small group, when somebody disagrees with you, you dial up and scream louder. You don't give better answer, you just talk louder. In the digital world, it's easy to create viral anything by putting forth truth or too often untruths. So the need, again, for communication in public relations, a corporation has to be so vigilant in today's world. You have to know what's out there. You have to be in the chat rooms, folks. Like it or not, you better be there. Because things can be said, the competition can do it. Unfortunately, strong values is not a universal skill set in today's world. It just isn't. So you have to be vigilant. You play by values, but don't expect others to necessarily play by the same rules. So you have to be in the chat rooms. You have to know what's being said. You have to counter. As soon as you hear something that's untrue, you have to correct it. You have to be on top of it. And I think the role of the PR folks in helping maintain the brand in a position of leadership is becoming ever more critical. So yes, the social media in today's world is powerful. The word of mouth was always the most important medium. Not television, not print, word of mouth. Today, that's doubly so, because the internet helps you do that, and social media is a vehicle for doing that. And so a brand, a product brand or a corporate brand must be in the forefront of social media and in the digital world. Very critical.
But how does, I like to hear you say that communicators and public relations professionals have a key role to play, because we are the ones in the chat room speaking on behalf of our corporations. But how does business manage their communications to protect and enhance the reputation? Because it's very easy for others to start controlling your brand.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying. So others may try to control your brand. Your job is to defend that. Your job is to defend that and to constantly put your best foot forward. So again, remember the fundamental things that you have to talk about. You have to talk about the differentiation versus your competition. You have to talk about the relevance that you bring to the party, functionally or emotionally. And you have to always be trustworthy. So if somebody attacks your integrity, you better be all over it with examples to contradict those people and to call them up on it and say, that is not true, these people are phonies, etc. And here's where we stand, and here are the examples of how we do business. But you can't fake it. You can't fake it. You have to do it, folks. And so what's the difficulty here? Is to really perform according to your talk. Walk the talk. That's job one. It's not about spin, folks. And don't look to your PR people of your management and say, okay, they'll fix the problem. No. You fix the problem. You leader fix the problem. And then it's their job to manage from there on. But it's a fully integrated end-to-end process here. Starts always with a product and ends up with the consumer. And so communications people, marketing people have the whole gamut to work with. But it has to start from the beginning all the way through the very end.
And what's the role of traditional media?
Well, look, to me, what's the role of marketing? Well, let's separate two things. Let's talk about corporate brand for a moment, because there's a slightly different task sometimes about the corporate brand. That has to do with public affairs, has to do with different set of stakeholders, the financial community, the community itself, it has to deal with government increasingly, and governments around the world globally. It's a very complex business. So I think that we have to think about public relations in the sense of, first, what is the role of public relations for the corporate brand, and how it must work effectively in that area. And there, I think the public relations representative has to be at the highest level in the C-suite. Must be there. If not, it will be very dangerous for the corporation. We can talk later about what's it take to get there, and the second part is product and service marketing. And there I say, we have to again think about what is marketing. Marketing is bringing the customer and the brand together. That's all it is. It's no more difficult than that. And so you have to think about marketing as having multiple, many ways of accomplishing that bringing together, whether it's television, print, social media, public relations of different kinds. It all has to be one and has to be integrated. And I was fortunate enough myself to be able to work and effectively as an integrated company. It's not necessarily where the model is today, to be honest, and people are paying for that. But the reality is that a fully integrated communications program is the way of the future. There's no question about that. And so you have to go with whatever works best. You have to work in all areas and choose according to the amount of money you have and all the rest of it. You put together the optimum program with the resources that you have. But it should be absolutely fully integrated. You never should think about, well, the advertising people are fighting with PR people, are fighting with the direct marketing people, with the design people. That's silly. It's silly, destructive, and it doesn't work very well.
Peter, there are so many things we'd like to talk about. How do you get to the C-suite, to be accepted into the C-suite? What's the role of TV and all this? But we have very little time left, and I want to leave some time for you to talk about your book. But first, if you allow me, there's something I'm really curious to hear you speak about. And it's about our recent elections here in Canada. You probably...
Of course, I'm an expert.
You probably noticed that our new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is getting some rather unusual media coverage, not only here in Canada, but around the globe. More than anything, foreign media are talking about his personality, not about his political views, not about his programs. They're comparing him to the Kennedys. They're calling him the sexiest country leader in the world. They're talking about his tattoos. They're talking about his dancing skills. They're talking about his mother's artistic heritage, his smoking dope. How is this going to affect the image of Canada?
I think actually, quite seriously, I think there's a global phenomena here. And that is, let's go back to the issue of trust where you started in the very beginning. I think the establishment, if you look up what I mean by establishment, I'm talking about the political environment, the political leadership, and the business leadership. They're sort of, in the minds of the people, they put them together and say, you are the establishment. You leaders, you business leaders, you political leaders, you are failing us. You are failing us. We have serious problems in the developed world for sure nowadays compared to what it used to be. And the system has not been delivering what is necessary for the people to thrive. Okay? And so the people are angry. I can talk obviously more articulately about what's happening in the United States than in Canada. But you know, you've seen a lot and you're privy, because we in the States live in a glass house. And so Donald Trump, our star politician today, is it about him? No, it's not about him. What he's saying is really all those bozos, he calls them idiots in Washington. Well, they're not idiots, but they act like ones because they do nothing. And you have to be an idiot to look at the problems that the country has and do nothing, and choose to do nothing. I mean, that's where we are. So people are looking for something different. That's what they're doing. And they don't know exactly how to judge the persons that come before them. And so when they see somebody that looks different, feels different, there's hope that maybe they will have something that these other folks who have had a chance to be in power and been elected there and been around for a while, they're not doing it right. So to me, we're seeing a sort of a reflection of this anger or this great dissatisfaction. So I certainly don't know what Mr. Trudeau, what his ideas are, nor do I or you know what he's going to do or how well he's going to do it. Time will tell. We've paid the money, we're going to see the play. But I also say, because we're all business people in this room, that I think we business people have an important responsibility here. Because it's not just about keep doing what we've been doing. What we've been doing has not worked. And part of the challenge for us is that we business have been too greedy. And more importantly, the shareholders have forced us in a situation where the only thing that matters, apparently, is to deliver those short-term results on a quarterly basis. We're not paying people enough, and we're not investing enough money in our businesses. And that's a tragedy. And if we continue this, we're going to end up in serious trouble. Because the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is too great. It is much more serious in America, believe it or not, than it is in Canada. The disparity in America is the highest in the developed world, is the highest that's ever been in America, including the 1920s at the Great Depression. And I'm worried. I'm worried because history is 100% clear on how these problems get resolved. You either redistribute wealth or you redistribute poverty. Redistribute wealth through punitive taxation, or the mob in the streets are going to take care of that. And, neither solution is particularly attractive. So we have some time, not much. I don't mean decades. There's a short window here for we business people to look at ourselves honestly and say, we've got to do things differently. Free enterprise capitalism can work, has worked. It's it's taken hundreds of millions of people out of abject poverty, has made America very strong, has made Canada a very strong nation. It can work. But our version has been hijacked by this somewhat greedy shareholder mindset and the financial system that is taking us on the wrong path. And I think it's up to the business people to really, again, walk the talk and really go up there and do something about it. Because governments are, at least in the United States, have been unable to cope. And I hope in Canada, Mr. Trudeau really understands the problem. And we were talking, just as we were coming in this morning, about the partnership between the governments and private business. And that can be a very powerful force for the good. Because look, there are three things that have to happen to fix the, not only inequality of income, but the inequality, socioeconomic inequality that exists with terrible education. We're creating a caste system, certainly in America, where it's very hard to get out of. There's no early education. There's poor schooling because we pay education with real estate taxes in America. And so you've got people, unemployment is not 5%. That's a fantasy. It's probably 15 to 20% because the 5% counts of the people currently looking for jobs. Well, people have given up. So the real unemployment is huge in America. So we have to create jobs. We have to get people more, pay people more, and we have to reimagine education. And business can do a lot to make it happen, and business and government can be an extraordinary force for the good. And I hope Mr. Trudeau in Canada with business leaders can do something extraordinarily positive, and maybe this time we can look north for a positive example. I hope so.
That's what you speak about in your recent op-ed in the New York Times.
Yes.
And in some of your blog posts. You're very passionate about fighting inequalities, and that's what you've just told us about. Is that what your third book is about, and when is this coming out?
Well, I don't know. I'm speaking with publishers right now. The publishing business in the United States is not exactly courageous. But yes. Yes, there you go. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I'll be happy. Be careful. You ask me for lunch, I'll come for lunch. But seriously, it's something I feel very passionately about, and the title is Capitalists Arise, because we better wake up and do what it takes for us to try to make it happen the right way.
Peter, thank you very much. I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm sure there are people in the room who have a few of the topics that we haven't talked about, or those that we have covered that you'd like more explanations about. So please feel free to ask some questions. I don't know, are there mics in the room, Jordan? Okay, very good. So who would like to go with the first question?
Please, anything. Challenges, particularly. Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, I am delighted. My name is Michelle Fournet. I'm professor in marketing department at John Molson School of Business, and I'm specialized in strategic relationship marketing. So your words this morning was like, for me, going to church. They are what I've been teaching and researching for the past 20 years. And really, first point, people coming out of here, what would be the 3 elements they should remember so they apply it? And number 2, you raise a point where is it the evil or the God's approach? When you say business and government should work together, we have the lobbyists who usually use the evil side. What would you suggest for the good side?
You know, let's start with the last question first. I think it takes basically courage. You know, lobbyists also changed. I was involved in the lobbying business. We had 4 companies in Washington lobbying. And you know what it was? It was it was putting forth a case of information about what a complex industry would be like in the data. And the reason that one was able to talk to them is you won the trust of the congressional staff by not obfuscating the truth and not putting yourself as the perfect company or the perfect this. You would be willing to tell them, here's all of the reality of the business problem that you guys have to deal with. But on balance, this direction is probably a better one. You judge, but here are the facts. That's what we used to do. Well, that's long gone. Now it's not about that. Now it's about you support this. Our PAC will go to your little town or your little state or your little district, and you can count on us. Trust me, we'll count on you. And all these crazies in our end, and I'm speaking about America now, not Canada, obviously. And so it's very important to have the courage as elected officials. If elected officials, and by the way, we send the bozos to Washington. It's not the Martians who are doing this. We're doing this. So if we send people in Washington who say, I am for the common good, I really believe in the common sense, I'm going to listen to common sense stuff, and I'm elected to do what's right for America. You do that, and the lobbyists will become powerless. Because every time the powerful guy comes in and say, you do this, I'll support you for your next election, the guy said, get out of here. I don't want to hear you. If you help educate me into something, give me the real, you see what I'm saying? So I think it can be done. This is not nuclear physics here. But the people have to make a decision. The people going to Washington or to Ottawa have to really agree that their mission is to do what's right for Canada or for America. And then I think we're on the right track. The three things, I don't know what the three things are, but I think it's important for us to remember what business is at the end all about, and to put the customer first. I would say if we start at that point, we're going to be on a good path. You have to look, there are 5 stakeholders. It's the customer, right? It's the employees, it's the corporation itself, it's the shareholder, it's the community in which a business conducts itself and does business. So the role of a business is to optimize those, not equal, but optimize those 5 stakeholders. You do that, and you're going to win. Guaranteed you will win, and you'll win big time. But it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to tell the business community or the street and the Wall Street guys. Yeah, I remember there was a recorded when Larry Page, the CEO of Google, gave a quarterly report, and he said we gave everybody in the company a $10,000 raise. Wall Street went crazy on the telephone. He said, you destroyed your quarter, you're terrible, blah, 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 blah. How can you possibly defend that? The revenues went up, by the way, during that quarter. And he said, we had a great quarter. Have a good day. That's what it takes. You got to take some bullets. You got to take some bullets. You have to be willing as a CEO to say, I'm doing the right thing. Even the CEO of Walmart, 10 days ago, got all kinds of hell for raising the minimum wage from $7 to $9. And he says, I'm doing the right thing for the long term for my company. We need more of those people, not only to do it. By the way, there's an awful lot of businesses that do it the right way today in Canada and America. But they're kind of quiet. And what we have to do is to scream out loud that when we do the right things and change the culture, the larger culture of the environment.
The short-term stock market performance is the most common benchmark. I think you mentioned that is wrong. So how could we build, how could we work to create an alternative in terms of long-term growth by the sensibility to customers? What could be the benchmark? How could the advertising industry contribute to build a different benchmark, a real benchmark with a longer view?
Well, the advertising people can, and let me separate advertising from public relations for a moment. I think the advertising people need to lobby and say, if you want to raise revenues, let's invest to make sure that the brands are kept strong. What bothers me about brands, I'll tell you what bothers me today. We don't measure them. In early 90s, we developed a young Rubicam, what is still the only, to my knowledge, the only measurement of brands. And they can be measured. You can measure the relevance, you can measure the differentiation, you can measure trust, we know all this stuff. We can also translate into dollars and cents what the value of that means. Okay, we've done that. So at the end of each year, I would suggest that what we have to do as corporations is to measure our brands. And instead of saying, oh, we have to have yet the 15th promotion of the season, that's on price, so we can drive revenue with that. We say, no, we have to build the brand. The brand is an annuity. It keeps giving back and giving back, but you got to keep it strong. And you're not going to do it if you cheapen the brand, if you try to diminish the brand only to the price, and you feed into the commodity trap, and then at the bar, what's the cheapest? It doesn't work. So advertising people have an important job to do. The PR people, who should feel the pulse of what's going on in the marketplace, should go talk to the CEOs, to the C-suite, and say, look, we've got a problem here. The great unwashed are not happy with us. And that's serious stuff. So, Mr. CEO, you better begin to think about how we can change. And let's talk to the board and say, to the CEO can say, we're in this soup together. I'm going to step out, but you got to give me the air cover, because those terrorist activists are going to come after us, maybe. So you got to protect us. Okay? Are we in this together? So those are the things that have to begin to happen, those kind of conversations. And sooner or later, we've got to communicate then. We have to communicate out loud to the equity holder and say, what kind of company do you want to, whose stock do you want to buy? And so we can get there. We can get there.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jenny. I work for a company called Beauregard Recreational Products. You've talked a lot about trust this morning, and I want to challenge that.
Please,
It's a little bit out of the scope of what you discussed, but I'll be interested to hear your point of view. Today, you talk about how important customers are and how a company needs to make and enhance the consumer experience. However, today I read a lot of articles about companies, big organizations as Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, who turn their head down from agencies because their lack of trust of their media agency today. They reshuffle, I would say, their ecosystem, moving forward or towards more, I would say, hybrid model. I'd like to hear about a hybrid model. I'd like to hear your perspective about where do you see agencies in the future?
But you know what? The same thing, okay, we were talking about brands. So tell me, how are our communication brands or agency brands going to be different? What do you do differently than the person next to you or the firm next to you, etc.? So have we not, the question is, have we not really brought this about ourselves? Because, the clients are really responding to what they see. They can't tell the difference between brands, so they say, they either will shop you on price, and you know that goes on, right? And it goes on because are they seeing real business results happening? You know, we have allowed, I say we, although I haven't been in the advertising business for a long time now, but I've seen it from the other side. I've been on 7 public company boards, and I see the need the clients have for great marketing is huge, but they're not getting help. Because the agency business are copying what they think the clients want them to do, which is to be in the transaction business. And Dominique asked me or alluded to the fact, well, how do you get the right to be in the C-suite and talk to the C-suite leaders? You do it by trying to help them solve their business problems, not just communication problems per se. Communication problems are related to business problems. So an agency, a PR agency, an advertising agency combined have to be able to solve business problems. So you have to spend time to understand, if you want to be in the transaction business, you'll end up with the hybrid models of whatever the next thing is, or being shopped on price every day. Because if they think of you at a cost, you're dead. Sooner or later, you'll go out of business. So the professional advertising agencies and PR businesses have got to really take themselves seriously. Say, we're in the business of helping our clients solve their problems. So first of all, I got to understand what my clients' problems are. I got to spend time. I've got to have the people who can really understand and grasp business problems, where the money goes, how to make money, what the profit issues are, what the dimensions of the business are, what constraints are, and then come up with business solutions, which, by the way, probably have communications problems. But you got to move up the line. The lower you get down the scale to say, give me 2 ads, we have to run a promotion on this, and here are the elements of the promotion, I'll go do it, come back to me in 2 weeks with another promotion. If that's a business you want to do, you're not going to win. You're going to continue. So you have every right to challenge me about that. Because if the business continues to do that, it will end up like every other commodity business in the world. No margins. Margin will go away. Solve problems. Go to the CEO and tell him, look, Mr. CEO, here's how we're going to really win in the next 6 months, in the next year. This is what we have to do. These are the programs, and here's why. That takes time. It takes talent. You have to hire the right kind of people who really understand the client's business as well, if not better, because what you should have, we should have, is knowledge of the customer. We know the customer best, or should. So we got to bring superior intelligence about the customer and how the customer's wants and needs can be represented in the business. Sometimes it could be a product improvement or a line extension. So we really have to think about engagement, not transaction. I think Dominique used the word transactions. We got to get away from the transaction business and get into the engagement business with customers and with our clients. And then the next time you're not going to challenge me. Because that's the only way, no, but I'm serious, that's the only way out, is to raise our game and become relevant and differentiated.
Yes, I'm interested in the notion of and the relevance of brand for non-business organizations, maybe in no to low competition environments. I mean, is it something that these organizations need to spend time and effort on building, and is it anything different than what they've always been doing? Relating to reputation and values, culture, sound management, etc.
I'm smiling a little bit because I'm vice chair of a large hospital in New York City, not for profit. And I tell you, every ounce of anything I've ever learned in business, we need to apply to my hospital. Yes, it is competitive, brutally competitive. Occupancy is critical. If in the hospital business you lose 2 or 3% of your occupancy rate, you are a disaster because the margins are small. Not because you don't care, but because it's a small margin business. We, like you, the Canadian system is different. Mm-hmm. But ours is we have government insurance. But both the Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare is for the old folks, Medicaid is for those who don't have the right enough money, that government reimburses the hospitals. They cover about 80% of the actual cost in the States. So we have to, and the rest is, we break even with commercial business. But we have to be very, very sensitive to the pricing situation. And so the not-for-profits either are in a competitive arena or should give more and more of their money to where the philanthropic intent is instead of on administrative things. So again, think about, you've got to be relevant, you have to be differentiated, make a difference in the marketplace, and you have to be trusted. Trust is vitally important in the not-for-profit area. So everything we said about branding in the business world, to me, applies at least as much to the not-for-profit business. Absolutely.
We'll take one more question.
Hi, I'm lucky to be the last one, but my question is quite simple, actually. We talk a lot about trust. What's the trust businesses should put in young workers like me? For example, we found very few young members on boards or on administration council. How do you integrate young workers like me into cultural businesses, or how do you make, I don't know, how do you bring your business to trust them more and to elevate young workers?
How do you break through the old boys network? Is that what you said? The glass ceilings. Yes. How old is Mr. Trudeau? 43. Hello?
He's 43.
No, I heard the number. Well, I was just suggesting that you've just elected Prime Minister who represents, I think, what you were saying that we should do, right? So your country decided.
And half of this cabinet, his promise, will be women.
There you go. So good things can happen. And this is the point, that it's leadership from the top on down. And if he delivers on his promise, half of them should be women and young and you know, I think the greatest thing that has happened over the last 20, 30 years in business has been the emergence of women in the top leadership roles in businesses. Because, you know, you're extremely sensitive, you have all the talent. I don't want to diminish my union. But, you know, it's vitally important to do what you say. And by the way, it's happening. And it happens by example. And it's happening in Canada, it happens in all areas of business, and it's going to continue to do. And actually, it's going to happen by necessity very faster and faster, because just simple technology will demand that more youthful talent will rise to the top, because the old folks, they are just not, most of us don't really get it fully. So just the natural evolution of this is going to bring many more younger people to the party. And the rest of the thing, I think, is a question of doing. It's sticking your neck out. Particularly young people, usually they don't. They're risk adverse. So stick your neck out. Speak the truth. Stand for values. Come up with great ideas. And believe me, in today's world, that's what makes the difference. So the more you are really focusing on long-term solution, it's not about entitlement, whether you're a man or a woman. It's not about entitlement. At the end of the day, it's about being able to deliver the right thing at the right time. So I would encourage you to have, to really believe in yourself, believe in your idea, speak out about them, and watch out. Before you know it, people will just drown you with their need because people are looking for solutions. We're living in an extraordinarily competitive time, a difficult time. Ideas matter, and I think, I am really grateful to have had a chance to speak to such an enlightened audience, and I'm encouraged that we had this dialogue this morning. I thank you very much.